Pele leaned in and said something to Freddie.
Don't let them change you. Keep working on what makes you different and what makes you special. It was great advice, but it caused me some problems.
But what could change Freddie Adu?
Soccer is going to explode, and it's going to be around this kid.
We were the Beatles. Everywhere we went, it was the Freddie show.
And with that came the expectation, and with that came the pressure.
New episodes of American Prodigy drop Tuesdays from Blue Wire Podcasts.
Sup, Hardwood Knocks listeners. I am Dan Favale coming at you once more without my fantastic co-host, Adam Frommel. I am, however, excited to keep our look-ahead train a-rolling. We have two teams for you today. First up, we will have Tony Jones of The Athletic on to discuss the Utah Jazz. He covers them and the NBA at large over at The Athletic. Follow him on Twitter at TJonesNBA, spelled exactly as it sounds. After him, we will speak with Derrick James, who covers the Minnesota Timberwolves for the A Wolf Among Wolves blog and Canis Hoopus. He also covers the Seattle Storm for The Next Hoops. Follow him on Twitter as well, at Derrick James NBA, spelled exactly as it sounds. How great is that? Some easy to talk about Twitter handles today. Before we dive in, one, I want to thank everyone for really engaging with our singular team pods. Or I guess we can still call them multi-team pods, but the downloads have been fairly consistent with our league-wide episodes. We hope that you continue to download every episode. If you're listening for the first time, I beg, plead, implore you to subscribe, download all of our episodes. Whether or not you use iTunes, also head over there, search Hardwood Knocks, throw us a rating, write a review. That really helps us as well. Also, we are closing in on 300 reviews, and once we top that, once we get a little ahead of it, there may be an NBA 2K giveaway. Who knows? I don't know. Maybe I'm lying. Am I lying? Who knows? Let's find out. Get us comfortably above 300 ratings, and we will see. Without further delay, though, let's get to some Utah Jazz with Tony Jones, and then some Minnesota Timberwolves with Derrick James. Tony, thank you so much for coming on the Hardwood Knocks podcast to talk some Utah Jazz with me. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me. I definitely appreciate it. Appreciate the invite.
Oh, no, please. We need to talk Jazz. Who better to bring on than you? So I think the place to start with them is they had it felt like an upkeeping offseason where, you extend Donovan Mitchell, you re-sign Jordan Clarkson, and you're bringing back Derrick Favors. And so I'm just wondering what your overall impression was of the offseason, just the body of work that they did relative to where they finished last year.
Yeah, it's interesting. I thought they had a pretty effective offseason. I think there are people who don't share that same sentiment, but I definitely thought they had a good offseason because I think that they, on paper, of course. Now this has to be proven, once the games start. But on paper, I mean, they've plugged, most of their holes. They were an atrocious team last year when Rudy Gobert was off the floor, and that was because they couldn't play, primarily because they couldn't play the same way when he was off the floor on either end of the court. And Derrick Favors solves that in spades. Favors is still, you're essentially getting a guy who's still a starting level player in this league, for 15 to 18 minutes a night, depending on the matchup. So, I think the Favors will help the second unit pretty significantly. I thought that the Jazz, lacked a perimeter defender, just a specialist, somebody who could, guard for 10 minutes a night. And I think that Shaquille Harrison, that signing helps that immeasurably. And the Jazz are counting on continuity. I mean, they're counting on, the core of Mitchell, Bogdanovic, Conley, and Gobert being together for another year, really helping. I think this team was really good through its first 8 last year. And I think that their first 8 got better this year. So we'll see how it works out once the ball goes in the air and the game starts for real.
I feel like the criticism has mainly focused on as if they made a choice between adding an athletic wing to like play the help out at the 4 and then just giving the entire MLE to Derrick Favors. And I think my question there would just be like, where else was that money supposed to go? Maybe you can still question the decision to invest in another big and deciding, hey, we're not going to play basically a single minute without an above average center on the court. But I just don't know like who was the wing that that athletic wing they were supposed to sign. So if the money wasn't like Derrick Favors, I think could have just plainly been the best player they were able to get for the money that they had to spend.
Well, it's in my opinion that, I thought that, adding a defensive wing was a priority, but I thought that, figuring out that the non-Rudy Gobert minutes was hands down, far and away the number one issue for the Jazz last year. There were so many times where Rudy Gobert would be on the floor for his first 9 minutes of his rotation in the first quarter, and the Jazz would be up 6 when 6 to 8 points when he went to the bench, and 4 minutes later, 5 minutes later, they'd be down.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not a defensive wing issue. That's a backup big issue for the Jazz for the way that they play. So for the way that they play, it was, Favors was a significantly more pressing issue in my estimation. And plus, the Jazz were smoked last year by one team. And I mean smoked.
Mm-hmm.
Like there was one team last year that the Jazz just could not compete with, and that was the Lakers. And that's because they did not have the size to deal with their too big alignment. And Favors, obviously you're not going to stop Anthony Davis, but Favors helps. You can put Favors on Anthony Davis, and what that means is Rudy Gobert at the same time does not have to guard Anthony Davis. He can guard whoever the center is. So, those are some subtle things that Favors helps with. And, I get that the Jazz needed a defensive wing. I think that Harrison helps because he can guard at the very least, he can guard point guards and shooting guards.
Mm-hmm.
Royce O'Neal guards small forwards and power forwards. So, I think that they at least adequately figured out pretty much all of their issues from last year.
2020 has already reshaped how we work, and it's almost over. Businesses across the globe are challenged to be their most efficient, which means every hire is critical. Well, Indeed is here to help. Unlike other sites, Indeed gives you full control and payment flexibility over your hiring. You only pay for what you need, you can pause your account at any time, and there are no long-term contracts. And now, Indeed's new way of matching you with candidates instantly delivers a short list of quality candidates whose resumes on Indeed match your job criteria that you can contact the moment you sponsor a job, making Indeed the only job site that can move as fast as you do. Right now, Indeed is offering our listeners a free $75 credit to boost your job post, which means more quality candidates will see it, and fast. Try Indeed out with a free $75 credit at Indeed.com/Blue Wire. This is their best offer available anywhere. Go right now to Indeed.com/Blue Wire. Offer is valid through December 31st. Terms and conditions apply.
Looking at Donovan Mitchell specifically, did you view like his performance in the bubble as kind of like particularly in that for most of the postseason series like as sort of a swing moment for this team? Because it felt like his official entry into stardom, where everyone was waiting to see whether he could have a more efficient offensive impact in the postseason following his first two trips there, and then he's just he's absolutely volcanic through most of those playoffs. And so is that just another, when you're looking for improvement from this team, where how can they get better if Derrick Favors was their biggest addition, that some of that can actually still come internally because this is only going to be Donovan Mitchell's fourth season and because of the performance that he is working off of?
Well, the interesting thing was he had a great postseason the first year, his rookie year. There were arguments that he was the best player in the series against Oklahoma City. obviously that Houston series in his second year was really rough, very 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 rough from an efficiency standpoint, from a decision making standpoint. But the Jazz look at Donovan Mitchell and they think that he has a chance to become a superstar at some point in his career. And he showed flashes of it, obviously. Now the question is, what part of the bubble where obviously he and Jamal Murray turned in some historic performances, what part of the bubble translates? Now, Donovan Mitchell shot about 55 to 57%. I don't know off the top of my head, off the dribble threes,
right,
in the bubble. He's not going to shoot that in the regular season. That's not going to translate. But what can translate is the decision making, where he 80% of 8 out of 10 times in the bubble, he was making the right decision. Even if the shot missed, he was making the right decision, make or miss, between whether he takes the shot or creating for somebody else on his team. And I would estimate that was probably about a 6 out of 10 during the regular season. So, if the decision making translates, it's very obvious to the Jazz that Donovan Mitchell's best NBA position is going to be a point guard, and that's something that was not anticipated his first couple of years. It was like, okay, let's see if he can be a point guard, but he made a significant leap towards actually becoming a franchise point guard. And so now the Jazz feel, okay, Mike Conley can play the point and Donovan Mitchell can play the point, and they're fine both ways. So I think the Jazz are pretty bullish on Donovan and what he can become going forward.
That's kind of the vision of him as a point guard, and he spent a lot of time there last year, and a big part of that, I'm sure, was because Mike Conley missed a bunch of time. But you also look at the makeup of this roster, and it feels like that is sort of how they envision him, because they can stagger him and Conley a bunch, and then they also just really don't have you don't identify someone who's definitely going to get the as a backup point guard. You're not going to want Jordan Clarkson in that role. Maybe Joe Ingles as a primary playmaker. Those lineups can be strained, and so when you just look at the makeup of the secondary part of this roster, it makes you feel even more like they believe that his long-term position is going to be that point guard spot.
Yeah, well, this is by design, because if the Jazz didn't feel like Donovan Mitchell was a point guard, they would probably gone out and gotten one. Mm-hmm. It's the reason why they went out and got Emmanuel Mudiay last year, one of the reasons. But it's one of those things right now where the Jazz feel like, okay, once we're all, assuming good health, you have terrific point guard play for 48 minutes, and assuming good health, you have terrific center play for 48 minutes, and you can mix and match the rest because there are enough interchangeable parts where the Jazz can be really flexible. So I definitely think that. I definitely think that they're counting on Mitchell being able to log big minutes at the one spot, and to be able to, do everything that comes with that, which is, create for himself, create for others, but also, defend out of that spot and manage a game as well, which is, frankly, where he lacked the first couple of years.
Is having let's assume if he's healthy for more of the year than he was last season, is Mike Conley almost close to an addition for this team, just because of how many games he did miss, but then some of the inconsistency he battled with? I feel like he did close the year stronger, and so if you have him, you don't need to lean on him as much, I guess, if you're gonna maybe even close games with Mitchell at the one, or just have Mitchell at the one a bunch. But having him healthy, does that end up, even with and Bojan Bogdanovic, him coming back from wrist surgery, it feels like there's still an element of this team that we just didn't get to see last season. And so when everyone says oh, they didn't make enough changes or they didn't add enough talent, to know that we didn't see Mike Conley at full strength, and certainly in the bubble, we didn't have Bogdanovic there at all. Is that something that factors into this team's ceiling this season?
Well, I wouldn't call Mike Conley an addition. I thought he was pretty darn good in the bubble. And, I think the Jazz did as well. Obviously, he started rough. He had injury issues. He had some real acclimation issues into how do I play with Donovan Mitchell? Because he never played with another dynamic ball handler before. He never played with a guy that could play with the ball in his hands like Donovan Mitchell can. I mean, he was always playing with Tony Allen types.
Mm-hmm.
So that there was some real acclimation issues with Mike, and they ironed him out by the end of the year. Towards the end of the season, right before the COVID-19 shutdown, they figured out how to stagger Mitchell and Conley to the point where, okay, they're playing minutes together, but they're also playing minutes on their own, where both of those guys are running their own team. And now those two guys know, what to expect. So, I thought Conley was really good in the bubble, and I thought that he had started to get better towards the end of the regular season. Now, Bogdanovic, obviously, we didn't see him in the bubble at all. So, if you were to say, hey, Mitchell's going to improve, go from a guy that's like 24 a night to a guy that's about 26, 27, 5 and 5, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And Bogdanovic is still a guy that's giving you, 20 a night. Then guess what? The Jazz are going to be pretty darn good offensively between Conley, Mitchell, and Bogdanovic. And then, obviously you add in Rudy Gobert's ability to finish at the rim. You're adding Joe Ingles shooting, and you're adding Jordan Clarkson's ability to come off the bench and be a terrific six-man. So the component, what the Jazz looked at all-encompassing was, okay, we have a chance to be one of the best offenses in the league. Mm-hmm. But our ceiling is going to be our defense, which is ironic enough because the Jazz were always, a top 3 defense until last year, to where they dropped to all the way down to the middle of the pack. So if the Jazz can figure out a way to be one of the top, 6 or 7 offenses in the league, but also one of the top 10 defenses in the league, the way they figure it, they're going to win a lot of games this year, or they're going to have a chance to win a lot of games this year.
I do think it felt like part of their offensive success, at least like that trade midseason for Jordan Clarkson, it seemed like he sort of saved their bench. Do you view his performance in Utah from last year as replicable, where it's 4 years and $52 million? Is that a comfortable price point for what he's bringing to the table? Because his shot making was, almost from all over, was basically at a career high level last year. Even before he went to Utah.
Well, obviously, by any measure that you can think of, Jordan Clarkson had a career season last year. He was, he's obviously figured out his NBA niche, which is he's a high octane six man. He made shots from all over the place. Like you said, he saved the Jazz bench in large measure. So the question is, all right, here's the old adage is you're always going to perform great in a contract year, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now this is not a contract year. You have, all of the security that you want. You have $52 million. You have a 4-year contract. Now the question is, can he keep up that consistency? And that's something that Jordan's going to have to go out and prove. He's going to have to, go out and prove that, this is who he is. And the Jazz are confident that he can do that, but he still has to go out and do that.
How does the, like you mentioned at sort of the top of this podcast, the Jazz top 8 got better and is really strong. How does sort of who are the next guys outside those top 8 to keep an eye on? Because they're not going to, once you get to the playoffs, you're okay with going 8 deep, but I would assume they're not planning on going just those 8 players deep in every single game. So who are those other guys on this roster that are going to be regular parts of the rotation and have a chance to make an impact, or who they really need to make an impact?
So George Yang was in their top 8 last year. He's now your ninth. Juwan Morgan, who the Jazz are really high on, he probably becomes your 10th. And Mie Ioni, the second year wing out of Yale. He becomes your 11th probably, and the Jazz are high on him as well. Oni and Morgan, are two guys that played in the G League for most of the year last year. They developed. We know Morgan because he started a couple of games in the playoff series against Denver. So if those two pan out, and we know what George Niang does. He's a 40% 3-point shooter.
Right.
He's a ball mover, and he's a floor spacer. So those are your next three after the first 8, and then you look at Udoka Azubuike, who's Utah's first round draft pick. I think he's going to get some time because you can't expect both of Derrick Favors and Rudy Gobert to play all 72 games.
Mm-hmm.
So there are going to be games where he's going to have rotation minutes. And the Jazz are high. Well, at least offensively, they're high on Elijah Hughes, the rookie wing out of Syracuse. They think that he can play, at least offensively. They think he can play right now. They think that he, he's going to have a learning curve defensively on the other end, but offensively, they think that he can play. He's a good shooter. He's a good athlete. He's good with the ball in his hands. And he's putting the ball on the deck in camp, and he's making plays. So, it's going to be interesting to see those guys in the preseason. Mm-hmm. Because I think that through the first 3 preseason games, I would imagine that a lot of those young guys get a chance to do some things.
The wait is finally over. Football is back. You might not be at a game this year, but you can still be in on the action at BetOnline. BetOnline is going the extra mile to make sure you can get in on every possible chance to win this season. From game spreads and totals to team, player, and coaching props, BetOnline gives you more options to wager on than anywhere else. You can get in on their season opening bonuses today and start off wagering on wins, division odds, and championship futures all day, every day. Head to BetOnline today and take advantage of all the great sign-up bonuses. Don't forget to use promo code BlueWire, all one word, at betonline.ag. That's BlueWire, all one word. BetOnline, your online sportsbook experts.
And I know that their closing lineups, a lot of it will be matchup based, but when you look at specifically their top 6 guys, it feels like there's a lot of different ways that you could build out lineups there. So what do you envision or think will end up being their most common or most used or most effective crunch time lineup next year?
It will probably be Mike Conley, Donovan Mitchell, Joe Ingles, Bojan Bogdanovic, and Rudy Gobert. And then depending on the matchup, you swap out Joe Ingles and Royce O'Neal. But those 6, those are going to be your guys that close most of the nights.
Is there any chance that we see instances where maybe you remove Conley and use Mitchell at the 1 in those scenarios, or is that kind of take away too much shot creation?
No, the Jazz like Conley, and it's almost comical, that I read the Conley takes online and on Twitter, knowing how the Jazz feel about him internally. Mm-hmm. The Jazz really like him, and they really think he's really good. So, he's to the Jazz, he's unquestionably one of their top 5 players. So I would expect him to be firmly in the closing lineups for most of the season, if not all of the season.
Is there, and this is more obviously your preference based, a quirky lineup you could see them trying, a little bit offbeat at some point in the season, not necessarily in crunch time, but just at any point, maybe a smaller unit because they have these bigs who are in Favors and Gobert who could probably take up pretty much every single minute of most games when they're healthy, or just any lineup that you're particularly interested in seeing from this team leading into next season?
Yeah, I it's going to be interesting to see how much time Juwan Morgan gets. I can see there would be some lineups where, certain guys are out. He even ascends to the starting lineup. And the reason why I say that is because the numbers show that he plays really well in his minutes with Rudy Gobert. Um, so that's something that you watch out for. It'll be interesting to see. You know, you can't expect Donovan Mitchell and Mike Conley to play all 72 games concurrently.
Right.
So on the nights that one of those guys are out, how much time do you play Shaq Harrison? How much time do you give Mie only a shot? I think the thing, at least on paper, because we could say the same thing last year on paper, and then when the ball went up, it didn't really pan out. But on paper, the Jazz can go a lot of ways with a lot of matchups. They can go bigger if they want to play Rudy Gobert and Derrick Favors together. They can go smaller. They can throw Donovan Mitchell at the point guard and throw a lot of wings at you. They have a lot of shooting. They have a lot of playmaking as well. They just have a lot of guys who can dribble, pass, and shoot. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they stack up this year.
This is, and it's tough to say, impossible to say without actually seeing the games. And there are, they're not the most flexible team. They're hard capped. But if you get to a point mid-season and it's just clear that maybe they don't necessarily have like the athletic juice at the wing spots to worry about prospective playoff series against a few different opponents in the West, can you see this team? Just looking at the contracts they do have some movable pieces. Could you see a scenario where they're making a mid-season change, or do you think that I think every team maybe, or most good teams maybe, have the intention of sticking with who they have, but overall, do you just see them maybe not so inclined to make any sort of moves this season, or could you see them being willing to adjust if again that athletic juice defensively isn't there on the wings?
No, they're definitely willing to adjust if they see that they're not good enough. I think the passes has told us that, right? Their bench sucked the first couple of months of the season last year. So, they made a move to bolster the bench. They recognized that Jeff Green and Ed Davis were not working. So, they outright released Jeff Green and they demoted Ed Davis to third string. So, they've proven in the past that they're an aggressive front office. So if the Jazz don't use their 15th spot, and I'm not anticipating that they will, if they keep that 15th spot open, it'll be interesting to see what they do at the trade deadline if the need precipitates.
What do you think, maybe assuming that there isn't any big changes to this roster, what's a realistic, win total for them this year, or just place to angle for in the Western Conference hierarchy?
I think they can play with any team in the West outside of the Lakers in a playoff series. I think that the Lakers are the one team, or probably the only team in the West, that if they got into a series with the Jazz, I would make them significant. I would make the Jazz significant underdogs. Any other team, the Jazz will either be a slight underdog, or they'd be right there with them, or they'd be an outright favorite. So there are so many good teams in the West that I think that the Jazz have a ceiling and a floor, and I think that it's wide ranging. Like, I think they can finish all the way they could finish all the way at number 2 if everything goes right and they have good health and they play really well, and the parts really mesh. And I think they can finish as low as 6 if things don't go right. The thing about the Jazz is, they have too much talent and too much depth and too many good players to finish out to not make the playoffs. And I don't think that they're going to struggle to make the playoffs.
Right.
So that's why I would think that 6 would be their floor. But I do think that on paper, in my opinion, I think that this is the best team that I have seen Quin Snyder and Dennis Lindsey and Justin Zanuck put together. So it'll be interesting, but that's only on paper. You got to go out and play. So it'll be interesting to see if that all meshes once everything starts to count.
Yeah, I mean, as you said, the West is just so complicated because there's even an element of how much will the Lakers and the Clippers like really be committed to, like the regular season. Like I feel like those are two teams that might not care as much about playoff seeds, and so you could probably expand the Jazz's scope like even a little bit further. And there's what if Stephen Curry remains healthy with Golden State? What if KP gets healthy and plays well? And in Dallas, they're just so. What if James Harden isn't traded out of Houston? They're so like it almost feels like 1 through 7 this year could end up being any combination that you imagine.
Yeah, and and then not only is there the injury component, but there's the COVID-19 component.
Yeah, of course.
Now, the one thing I am interested in is with uh, the news of a vaccine now being available. Surprisingly, right now, what is the hierarchy for the NBA and for the NFL and for NCAA basketball for their players, for their guys and their personnel to get vaccinated? Because if you can vaccinate those guys rather quickly, if those guys um, and girls and men and women, ladies and gentlemen, if they, you know, if they qualify to be at or near the top of the food chain, for lack of a better word, in terms of qualifying for the vaccine, then the sports leagues, the major sports leagues can I don't want to say rid themselves, but they can protect themselves
Right.
a lot better against the pandemic than before.
This last question is like not so much pertaining to the court, but I do think it speaks to like what type of urgency the Jazz would have this season, and they'll have urgency anyway, just because a lot of some of the players on this team, Conley, Ingles, Bogdanovic, they are getting up there in years. But do you think there's any chance we get a Rudy Gobert extension, or is this more of a wait until the offseason type of situation at this point?
No, it's 50-50. I mean, I think it's going to go down to the wire. I know there's an offer on the table. Um, and I think that there's going to be some counter offers, and there's going to be some negotiating. So I think that it's one of those things that it's going to go down to the last day, and then we'll see what happens.
And I know that bigs are valued like so differently, and people think that you can approximate them on the cheap more so, and I think that's true to some extent. But if I am Rudy Gobert, like you saw different positions, but a player like Gordon Hayward get 4 years and so much money in a cap poor market, and next year there's just going to be like a few more teams, a bunch more teams with spending power that you have to believe. The saying that it only takes one team, like there might be 3 teams that could go high for Gobert. And again, I know it's center's more of the oversaturated position, but I'm just wondering if something like that factors into his thinking or even the Jazz's thinking at all, because it feels like it's a higher threat level after watching that in this type of market that a team would go after, a perennial defensive player of the year in his prime who is a defensive system unto himself.
Yeah, well, I mean, it only takes one, and then I mean, I think that NBA decision makers think differently than what we on Twitter think, and we can say that center's an oversaturated market, but it was literally just proven that it's not during the playoffs.
Hashtag Mason. Oh yeah.
Because the Lakers bludgeoned everybody on both ends of the floor because they had so much size and nobody else had the size to match up with them. So I think that once you get if Rudy Gobert got to unrestricted free agency, I think that there would be a market for him, and I think that there would be competition with the Jazz. And so, I know the Jazz are offering him a lot of money. They want to. They're clear that they want him to be with the organization for the rest of his career, and it'll be interesting to see what happens in the next few weeks.
Is there anything I didn't asked that I glossed over that you wanted to talk about, or something that's just nationally not recognized about this team or off the mark about them? Anything along those lines?
No, I think this was really good. Very thorough interview from my guy.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. I appreciate you coming on. For anyone who's not already following you on Twitter, what are you doing? Remedy that immediately. At T Jones on the NBA, spelled exactly as it sounds. He covers the Utah Jazz and the NBA for The Athletic. Tony, again, thank you so much for giving me your time, and I'm sure I'll be pestering you again down the line.
Absolutely, man. Thank you for having me, and I really appreciate me. I appreciate you.